The members of Parliament, the House of Representatives, have been in Standing Finance Committee for the past few days. You may not have been able to catch up with a lot of the things that have been happening. In day one, here are some key things that you may have missed. There has been no money set aside for the 10% increase for public servants anywhere in the budget. When asked about allocations for the 20,000 jobs the government is saying they will provide, there is none. No allocation in any ministry, in any item within the budget, except for the employment fund. However, it's just not enough. Believe it or not, the government admitted the URP program is being shut down. However, the spending for URP is up in some areas in the budget. Maths, no maths. NIS and electricity increases are coming within this fiscal year, yet it's not budgeted for in any ministry or agency at all. The biggest revelation day one of the Standing Finance Committee, major cuts in all of the PNM regional corporations. We're talking about Point Fortin as a borough, we're talking about Port of Spain as a city, we're talking about every single PNM regional corporation has suffered major cuts. The UNC ones, the exact opposite. Major increases. Imagine, just imagine, that is going to change your life if one of these corporations reside over the area you live in. That was just day one. So imagine what day two offered. We'll update you soon. The members of Parliament have been in Standing Finance Committee over the past few days. And if you didn't get to tune in to day two, here are some things you may have missed. So first off, OJT has been cut by $45 million. This resulting in 750 less jobs for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. Bull grants have been cut, and this will affect 20,000 students, possibly their families nationwide. In terms of the Water and Sewage Authority, there has been $100 million cut in salaries and wages. We can only imagine how this will affect our water supply and repairs throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Safety and security is no joke, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has seen a cut in wages and salaries of over $100 million. And finally, many of the questions asked were not answered sufficiently by ministers. So whilst the finance minister made a presentation on budget day, it's clear that a lot of the items mentioned in the budget statement aren't actually in the numbers. The devil is in the details. The devil is showing its hand. Stay tuned for an update of day 3. We had day 1 and day 2. Now for day 3, we've seen some clips go viral on social media. However, I want to focus with 5 points on one particular item. And that one particular item is the $475 million employment fund under the Ministry of Finance, which the finance minister admitted that it's not enough to take care of the 20,000 jobs promised. Now, one of the reasons we know these 20,000 jobs are to fall under this particular item is because they are not accounted for in any other line item in the personnel sections. In other words, these jobs are not permanent. It falls under contract employment, head 02016. Many ministries have a decrease there or no increase. The finance minister said the employment fund will be used. So we know that's where the funding for these jobs have to come from. And the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's East, Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly, was able to highlight that if all of these jobs were to be taken up and covered under this fund, it will amount to less than $2,000 per job, which is, for the record, below minimum wage. Also, this is just an estimate. So no money has been raised, and worse yet, properly allocated for what this fund is supposed to cover. Once again, in the budget 2025-2026,
Maths, just say maths. Magic and misprints. Day 4 of the Standing Finance Committee once again revealed bad management in the budget. This time around, let's focus on housing. The 20,000 houses promised in the budget, apparently the Minister of Housing is saying was a misprint, despite this being published on the Ministry of Finance's page and on the document circulated to parliamentarians. Imagine a massive item like that they're saying is simply typo. Point 2, housing sector cut by $100 million. This will impact construction, cripple jobs, and home ownership. HDC maintenance fund cut by 50%. This $30 million decrease can result in leaking roofs, elevators not being maintained, and neglected communities. Point 4, affordable housing program funding cannot be found. And you know what's interesting? When asked about HDC and certain funding, the Minister of Housing told the member for Tego Martin Northeast that they are going to make HDC self-sustainable. Now, this may sound like it makes sense. The point of HDC is to provide affordable housing for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So in other words, how can HDC all of a sudden be making profit on houses and expect it to be low income and affordable? The two just don't go together. And point 5, when pressed on all of these issues, the Minister of Housing simply said, "We will do magic." Clearly, we can't expect magic. Once again, as a generation, one of our main concerns remains housing. So we ask, Minister of Housing, is the maths really maths? Now for the final day of the Standing Finance Committee, day 5. The first point I want us to focus on is overseas travel for the Office of the Prime Minister has moved from $1 million to $10 million. The question is, where does the Prime Minister and the entourage plan on flying? Which wasn't answered, by the way. Publicity and promotion. This used to be a couple $100,000 for the Office of the Prime Minister. It's now $3.5 million for publicity and promotion for the Office of the Prime Minister. Tell me, what does the Office of the Prime Minister need to work so hard on promoting and publicizing? Energy confusion. Now, energy has been the main source of income for Trinidad and Tobago. But even the Minister of Energy doesn't know who is paying cabinet-appointed committee. Yes, the cabinet committee on the refinery. The minister does not know. Is it the ministry? Is it heritage? Is it TTPHL? Well, it remains. No one can say for sure. And the biggest point is point 5, absent leadership. After not being there for most of the Standing Finance Committee, with the exception of one day showing up for 15 minutes, Prime Minister wasn't there. On the final day, she came for 10 minutes. And that's what we are left with. Absent leadership in a time where things need to be explained. Now, the opposition remains firm and resolute on not supporting this budget. And I'll tell you why in another video.
The members of Parliament, the House of Representatives, have been in Standing Finance Committee for the past few days. You may not have been able to catch up with a lot of the things that have been happening. In day 1, here are some key things that you may have missed. There has been no money set aside for the 10% increase for public servants anywhere in the budget. When asked about allocations for the 20,000 jobs the government is saying they will provide, there is none. No allocation any ministry in any item within the budget except for the employment fund. However, it's just not enough. Believe it or not, the government admitted the URP program is being shut down. However, the spending for URP is up in some areas in the budget. Maths, not maths. NIS and electricity increases are coming within this fiscal year, yet it's not budgeted for in any ministry or agency at all. The biggest revelation day one of the Standing Finance Committee, major cuts in all of the PNM regional corporations. We're talking about Point Fortin as a borough, we're talking about Port of Spain as a city, we're talking about every single PNM regional corporation has suffered major cuts. The UNC ones, the exact opposite. Major increases. Imagine, just imagine, that is going to change your life if one of these corporations reside over the area you live in. That was just day one. So imagine what day two offer. We'll update you soon. The members of Parliament have been in Standing Finance Committee over the past few days. And if you didn't get to tune in to day two, here are some things you may have missed. So first off, OJT has been cut by $45 million. This resulting in 750 less jobs for the young people of Trinidad and Tobago. Bull grants have been cut, and this will affect 20,000 students and possibly their families nationwide. In terms of the Water and Sewage Authority, there has been $100 million cut in salaries and wages. We can only imagine how this will affect our water supply and repairs throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Safety and security is no joke, and the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service has seen a cut in wages and salaries of over $100 million. And finally, many of the questions asked were not answered sufficiently by ministers. So as the finance minister made a presentation on budget day, it's clear that a lot of the items mentioned in the budget statement aren't actually in the numbers. The devil is in the details. The devil is showing it him. Stay tuned for an update of day 3.
We had day 1 and day 2. Now for day 3, we've seen some clips go viral on social media. However, I want to focus with 5 points on one particular item. And that one particular item is the $475 million employment fund under the Ministry of Finance, which the finance minister admitted that it's not enough to take care of the 20,000 jobs promised. Now, one of the reasons we know these 20,000 jobs are to fall under this particular item is because they are not accounted for in any other line item in the personnel sections. In other words, these jobs are not permanent. It falls under contract employment head 02016. Many ministries have a decrease there or no increase. The finance minister said the employment fund will be used. So we know that's where the funding for these jobs have to come from. And the Member of Parliament for St. Anne's East, Dr. Nian Gadsby-Dolly, was able to highlight that if all of these jobs were to be taken up and covered under this fund, it will amount to less than $2,000 per job, which is, for the record, below minimum wage. Also, this is just an estimate. So no money has been raised, and worse yet, properly allocated for what this fund is supposed to cover. Once again, in the budget 2025-2026, maths, just say maths. Magic and misprints. Day 4 of the Standing Finance Committee once again revealed bad management in the budget. This time around, let's focus on housing. The 20,000 houses promised in the budget. Apparently, the Minister of Housing is saying was a misprint, despite this being published on the Ministry of Finance's page and on the document circulated to parliamentarians. Imagine a massive item like that. They're saying is simply typo. Point 2, housing sector cut by $100 million. This will impact construction, cripple jobs, and home ownership. HDC maintenance fund cut by 50%. This $30 million decrease can result in leaking roofs, elevators not being maintained, and neglected communities. Point 4, affordable housing program funding cannot be found. And you know what's interesting? When asked about HDC and certain funding, the Minister of Housing told the member for Tego Martin Northeast that they are going to make HDC self-sustainable. Now, this may sound like it makes sense. The point of HDC is to provide affordable housing for citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So in other words, how can HDC all of a sudden be making profit on houses and expect it to be low income and affordable? The two just don't go together. And point 5, when pressed on all of these issues, the Minister of Housing simply said, we will do magic. Clearly, we can't expect magic. Once again, as a generation, one of our main concerns remains housing. So we ask the Minister of Housing, is the math really math? Now for the final day of the Standing Finance Committee, day 5. The first point I want us to focus on is overseas travel for the Office of the Prime Minister has moved from $1 million to $10 million. The question is, where does the Prime Minister and the entourage plan on flying? Which wasn't answered, by the way. Publicity and promotion. This used to be a couple $100,000 for the Office of the Prime Minister. It's now $3.5 million for publicity and promotion for the Office of the Prime Minister. Tell me, what does the Office of the Prime Minister need to work so hard on promoting and publicizing? Energy confusion. Now, energy has been the main source of income for Trinidad and Tobago. But even the Minister of Energy doesn't know who is paying cabinet-appointed committee. Yes, the cabinet committee on the refinery. The minister does not know. Is it the ministry? Is it heritage? Is it TTPHL? Well, it remains. No one can say for sure. And the biggest point is point 5, absent leadership. After not being there for most of the Standing Finance Committee, with the exception of one day showing up for 15 minutes, Prime Minister wasn't there. On the final day, she came for 10 minutes. And that's what we are left with, absent leadership in a time where things need to be explained. Now, the opposition remains firm and resolute on not supporting this budget. And I'll tell you why in another video.
Panorama, beat the road like panorama. Heart I love, but I love me bacchanal. Love a bacchanal bad. The place mash up when we start to get on bad. Look the girl them ready, ready, ready. Look the truck man rolling, rolling, rolling. And there's 1,000 girl tongue in tongue. Whole day we drinking rum. Tell them don't slow me down. No, look how we beating road like it's panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Look how we beating road like it's panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the air. Come let me start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Start the bacchanal right now. Take a jump and a wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If they feel them more mad, band men a round of applause. Oh God. Look the girl them ready, ready, ready. Look the truck man rolling, rolling, rolling. And there's 1,000 girls down in town. Whole day we drinking rum. Tell them don't slow it up. No, look how we beating road like a panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the yeah. Look how we beating road like a panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the yeah. Come let me start the back and I'll right now. Take a jump and I'll wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Start the back and I'll right now. Take a jump and I'll wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If they feel them more mad, we follow, we play. And we go win. And we go win. And we go win. Look how we beating road like a panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the yeah. Look how we beating road like a panorama, panorama, panorama. Inside the yeah. Come let me start the back and I'll right down. Take a jump and I'll wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Start the back and I'll right down. Take a jump and I'll wind down. Tell them it's the time of the year and we don't miss it. Tell them we born bad, mashing up everywhere. If you feel them more mad, we follow, we play. And we go win. And we go win. And we go win. Baby, time is never enough. Even if we try to turn back the clock, just you and I, the present is us. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. We are alive, the present is home. So don't let your pride keep you alone. Some things in life we cannot control. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. Go back, go back, go back. Throwback, throwback, throwback. Go back, go back, go back. Till the feeling come again. So let we enjoy this now, girl. Do it all over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to feel the feeling again. All over, drunk or sober, so high like a stoner. Time to give them again. Like a throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back in time, back on my girl. Throwback baby, throwback baby, throwback baby. Like back Ayez a feta. Let we cool on the road, carnival day. Let we play, cause ayez a feta. Cause ayez a feta. We're back on our list. I did, you did, we did. Cause ayez a feta. Cause ayez a feta. I is the first to come, the last to leave. The whole party belong to me. Belong to me, na na na. Tell them the vibes get done when I around. The fete now start, carnival is me. Carnival is me. Cause I is a feta. 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 All through the day we fretting, all through the band are fretting, all in the road when things start exposed, hard are fretting, all through the fete we fretting, any fete are fretting, I'm swanky now, remember, I is a feta. I'm telling a party until it rain, I dressing up in my red, white and black. I don't care what nobody say. Every carnival I done day. Plus I know all artists and all the mass bands. Them say I'm a bad. I'm telling you where I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. As a Trini, Popo Trini. Yeah, cause they know about Trini does look. And they like how Trini does cook. And they like to hear Trini talk. And they like Trini woman walk. And we make good company. Yeah, and we make good company. And we make good company. See me done. We just dictate all the place for now. We just represent for we soca. We just sell out all the strong liquor. We just represent for we soca. Them say we mad and we bad. I'm telling you where we from Trinidad and Tobago. As a Trini, Popo Trini. Oh, cause they love how Trini does look.
I'll find out. Then there's a lot of speculation, not just here, not locally, everywhere. I mean, it's a situation that really demands everybody's attention. We will keep our eyes and ears peeled and act when we see it's appropriate.
Well, you know, Trinidad and Tobago is a very creative space. That clip actually became a meme over the weekend. Such was the, I would imagine, disbelief by many of the citizenry that the Prime Minister had no idea as to what was taking place on Friday, when many were in panic mode. People were picking up their children. There were calls left, right, and center. The grocery, as I mentioned, I went on Saturday morning, no bread to be had. So we ask ourselves, what's next, and how this week, the weeks ahead, and even Christmas will pan out, with clearly a building up of U.S. troops in the region, the Gerald Ford in the Caribbean waters, and President Trump in a 60-minute interview last evening suggesting, okay, he's not thinking of military action on land. However, he says Maduro's days are numbered. Go figure. I mean, obviously, these are some uncharted waters. We've never been here before. And to bring some perspective, and obviously for us to engage, I would say, in a very frank and honest discussion, because Marvin Gonzales, who's here with me, of course, good morning to you, Member of Parliament, former Minister of National Security. You're in the House. You're there while these debates are happening. You're seeing this firsthand from that lower house perspective. I want to ask you first and foremost. Well, firstly, I want to say thanks for being here bright and early.
Thank you very much, Jason.
All right,
Thank you very much.
spend the
Good
morning.
Yeah.
But you think enough is being done on the opposition side? Enough force is being put on the government to change this narrative, to ask for communication? I mean, obviously, I know you can't go out and march at this point in time because it's a state of emergency, so that might be problematic on the legal front for anybody trying to march against what's happening. But I'm just looking at from your standpoint on the bench there, having these discussions, because you're in government. Enough is being done to bring awareness to this moment? I mean, are you concerned with what's happening at this point in time?
Thank you very much, Jason. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago, and thank you for this platform for us to have a very interesting discussion on these very pertinent matters. So you've asked a very important question, whether the opposition is doing enough in the current context to bring pressure and to bring prominence to the issues that are affecting us, these very, very important and critical issues. Now, we have to operate within the confines of the law, and insofar as the Parliament is concerned, we are confined by the standing orders of the Parliament, where those matters can be raised. The standing orders allow for questions, urgent questions to be filed, questions for oral answers, questions for written responses, as well as motions. On Private Members' Day, you can have a specific motion where the opposition has the opportunity to highlight some of those issues so the public can be educated. So let's harken back to last week, Friday. I was at a House Committee meeting, and last week, Friday, around 11, and I started receiving a number of calls and WhatsApp messages about the state of affairs and the panic that is taking place in the capital city, the traffic, the gridlock, and what have you. And whilst I was there, I made a decision, because the House was scheduled to resume or to have a sitting at 1:30. And according to the standing orders, you have until 12:30 to file urgent questions for the government to respond. So I made the decision to file a question to the Minister of Defense to explain whether or not the Defense Force was placed on alert and soldiers were instructed to return to base, because that's the information that was coming to me. And I thought that given the state of panic in the country, the government, through urgent questions posed by the opposition, will have an opportunity to speak not to the PNM, but to the country on this very important matter. So the question was filed, and it was approved. And when the hearing started, I was given the opportunity to pose the question to the Minister of Defense. Can the Minister of Defense explain whether soldiers were instructed to return to base immediately? And not surprisingly, the Minister of Defense stood up and he invoked Standing Order 27(1)G, which allows a minister not to answer any question if the minister thinks that it is in the public's interest not to answer the question. Now, one would assume, Jason, that given the state of panic in the capital city and throughout the entire country, where international news media were reporting that there was going to be an imminent strike on Venezuela, and citizens of this country observing and reading what is taking place, and your army, your police service have all been called out to return to base with immediate effect, obviously citizens will go into a state of panic. And you would expect that a responsible government will take any opportunity that they can, especially in the Parliament, to speak clearly to the people, even if it means to do so to allay the fears of the people. And the minister invoked Standing Order 27(1)G not to answer the question. And that is a very serious particular issue.
Well, I'm looking at a response from the Minister of Homeland Security. He was at the opening of the new location of Daisy's Exclusive yesterday in Tunapuna, and he said that social media is to blame for fire, well, for putting fire into, well, fuel into this flame of panic and stuff. And also the Prime Minister, I was able to kind of dissect what she would have mentioned over the weekend, that, well, if there's nothing going on, there's nothing to report. So I guess in their, through their lens, no need to come out really and address the public if nothing is happening. clearly you see it through different lens.
Oh, it's I sat in the parliament and I listened to some of the government spokespersons, including the Minister of Homeland Security, because the Minister of Homeland Security appeared before the Standing Finance Committee of the parliament, and he was asked pertinent questions with respect to allocations made to his ministry. And the same Minister of Homeland Security, on numerous occasions, invoked national security consideration not to answer questions, to duck from answering questions. So when it is convenient to them, and of course it is in most instances, I want you to observe, and I want the country to observe the proceedings in the parliament, especially the Minister of Homeland Security and the Minister of Defense. They have started off their career, their political career, by looking at invading, or rather invoking standing orders to not answer to the people of Trinidad and Tobago and not to speak to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So I was shocked when I heard the Minister of Homeland Security saying, to ignore social media and stuff like that. The Minister of Homeland Security should check back a couple of years ago when the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, told the country, do not depend on the national media, the traditional media for your information. You should depend on social media for your information. She told the country this when she served as leader of the opposition a couple of years ago, encouraging the population that you should get your news from social media as opposed to traditional media. So when I heard him saying that yesterday, I was taken aback but not surprised, because the UNC utilized social media, especially when they were in opposition, and even more so now, to spew, misinformation and disinformation into the public. So they will say one thing when it is convenient to them, and they will say something else when, of course, it is convenient to them.
I mean, obviously, I'm seeing on the screen there via ticker tape communication crisis. Do you think there is indeed one going on? I mean, there is a lack of information,
yes.
But in terms of some mixed signals and some of the utterances, I look at, obviously, Minister Phillips, when he would have mentioned nuking Venezuela, then he had to kind of peg back. Of course, some of the Prime Minister's utterances in the early part of this would have been very strong. I've recognized she's toned it down a lot within recent time.
Yes.
Just the communication around what's happening at this point in time. Are we in crisis mode?
There's a serious vacuum of information in Trinidad and Tobago, and with it, a vacuum of leadership in Trinidad and Tobago. When I made my contribution in the SOE debate on Friday, I told the government that you are not speaking to the population. You are invoking standard orders in order to evade holding yourself to account, and you are not speaking clearly to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And therefore, when you don't speak and you don't take the people into your confidence, then they have to rely on other sources for their information. I mean, the Prime Minister, when she came in, she had her regular news conferences, and you can now count how many of her weekly press conferences that she attends. The Prime Minister is not speaking to the country. You would recall a couple of weeks ago when the U.S. Embassy issued a release advising citizens to stay away from premises owned and operated by the U.S. Embassy. And again, 2 or 3 Saturdays ago, there was widespread panic in the population, and the government, through its major spokesperson like the Prime Minister, the Minister of Defense, and the Minister of Homeland Security, refused to speak to the country on this very important issue. These are just some of the few examples in the SOE debate. The government is yet to explain to the country the basis upon which it decided to extend the state of emergency. And I told the Attorney General, speak to the population, take the population into your confidence. And when we ask questions through the standing orders, urgent questions and what have you, they invoke the privileges that are available to them so as not to disclose information to the public. So there's a serious vacuum of information and leadership in the country.
So this 3-month extension, and I want to pivot to that for a few before we come back to the current geopolitical uncertainty.
Yeah.
Through my own research, I've learned that indeed, if they plan to extend prior to the next 3 months, so if we go in now with the state of emergency into next year, if there are plans to extend beyond the 3 months that we're currently on, they will now need a special majority, which will now involve the upper house and the Senate Is that the case?
That's correct. So they would need to pass any further extension with a special majority in the lower house, which they have. But on this occasion, on the next occasion, they definitely will have to go up to the Senate. And the government does not have the required special majority in order to pass it. So they would need to rely on the opposition as well as the independent senators for any further extension of this current state of emergency.
Do you feel any ease with the state of emergency? Is there any difference on the ground when you talk to your constituents, when you move around? We all live here, Marvin, so you think it's necessary?
Let me start by saying, Jason, this state of emergency was called for a specific purpose. When this state of emergency was called, some days before, the Commissioner of Police and the Minister of Homeland Security were both telling the country that crime was under control and that there should be no need to panic, where crime and the national security forces, they are in control where crime is concerned. As a matter of fact, they were pointing to statistics that showed a decline in some serious crimes in Trinidad and Tobago. But a couple of days after they were boasting, we woke up to a morning hearing that there is a state of emergency. The first person or public official to speak to the country was the Commissioner of Police. I think it was somewhere around 9 or 10 o'clock a morning. And he was at pains to explain to the country that this state of emergency was not called in response to the criminal situation or crime in Trinidad and Tobago. It was called for a specific purpose. And let me explain what the statement by the President said with respect to the state of emergency. And I quote, "Criminal gangs in the island of Trinidad and Tobago are likely to increase acts of violence on a scale so extensive that it threatens persons and will endanger public safety. Persons already incarcerated are actively engaged in coordinated acts of violence that target the state and state actors. Having considered the information provided and given the above premises, I was certain that action needed to be taken or is immediately threatened by any person of such a nature and so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety to the extent that warranted a declaration of a state of public emergency in Trinidad and Tobago." Very serious matter. That was the basis upon which a state of emergency was declared in Trinidad and Tobago. It was immediate, it was dangerous, and the President was satisfied that we needed to declare a state of emergency in order to deal with a specific threat. Exactly what the Commissioner of Police said. After the state of emergency was declared, weeks or months after, the Commissioner of Police told the country that the threat was neutralized. So it meant then that the circumstances under which the state of emergency was declared, according to the Commissioner of Police, no longer exist because it was neutralized. So when you hear of murders, for example, in the month of October last month, you had 30-something murders. You heard of threats to ministers and all of the serious crimes that normally would happen outside of a state of emergency continue to exist. But let us not be distracted by that, because that calls for a separate discussion. Because the state of emergency had nothing to do with the murders that were taking place in the country and the kidnappings and the home invasions and what have you. That calls for a separate discussion. So when the government can come and say, well, we have a reduction in murder by 40-something%. I mean, we had a reduction 30-something% at the last state of emergency called by the PNM when by April, before the election was called. So let us not confuse the discussion. This state of emergency was called for a specific purpose, and according to the Commissioner of Police, the circumstances and the threat was neutralized. And therefore, I asked the Attorney General, you tell us whether this threat, because if you are asking for this state of emergency to be extended, then it meant that the threat that we spoke about in July still exists. Up to now, no one has been arrested for this threat. And you're talking about threat to persons in the judiciary, threat to senior law enforcement officials, according to the circumstances on which it was called, and threat to members of the prison service and what have you. No one was arrested. No one was charged. And the government, through their spokesperson in the parliament on Friday, admitted that so far not one person was arrested on being suspected of being involved in this particular threat. So you are extending the state of emergency, you are extending this state of emergency, and you have not again communicated with the public clearly whether and what you plan to do with this particular threat.
What's your feeling on the extension? What do you think is the ethos behind this particular extension? And do you anticipate we will be in a perpetual state of emergency where there will be calls for extension upon extension going forward?
And this is exactly what the government is doing. And it was the Member of Parliament for Port of Spain North St. Anne's West, MP Stuart Young, in his contribution, I remember him saying and telling the country that we have to be careful that we do not normalize state of emergencies in order to fight crime, because that is not what the Constitution envisaged for the declaration of a state of emergency. As a matter of fact, in Jamaica, the Jamaican government was doing the same thing, declaring state of emergency in certain parishes.
But it's mostly, it's for a particular area as opposed to the country.
In particular areas.
And I guess that will call for Trinidad to go do a constitutional kind of adjustment for that to take place.
It's very similar. The same constitutional provision that we've declared a state of emergency in Trinidad, our constitution in Jamaica is very similar. The wording of that particular aspect of the constitution is very similar. But the point I was about to make is that this matter was tested in the Jamaican court because the police commissioner and certain officials of law enforcement talk about, well, we had a reduction in gang activities, we have a reduction in murders and what have you. And the court held that that is not the basis for the declaration of a state of emergency, because you have laws on the books to deal with gang activities. You have laws on the books to deal with illegal trade of firearms and what have you. And the declaration of a state of emergency to do what you can normally do in law enforcement and other laws on the book. And therefore the court held that the declaration of a state of emergency in Jamaica was unconstitutional.
Interesting you mentioned the word law. I know that you're also a legal mind, and we look at the developments with the boats, fishing vessels being blown up. We have seen in the last couple of weeks what's going on in our southern Caribbean waters. Of course, the wording I recognize from the U.S. Is allowing this because they have now been deemed as narco-terrorists, and under that terrorist umbrella and bracket, they're using military force. From a legal framework, and with our support, obviously, because the utterances from our leadership and the suggestion was to kill them violently, at least in the earlies. We have seen a kind of toning down, as it were, of the rhetoric. But nonetheless, through the legal lens, could there be any fallout for us per se, any consequences for us supporting this kind of action? And do you anticipate this is all part of the theater of war for a greater push, which more or less people are suggesting regime change in Venezuela?
When you listen to the spokespersons and the politicians in America, it's clear that this whole buildup of military activity is geared towards regime change in Venezuela. And so that's the main intent. But let us go back to the issue of the blowing up of the boats. Governments need to be guided by international law, human rights laws, and laws that guide law enforcement in treating with those particular matters. With the 60-something odd persons that have been killed out in the Caribbean Pacific Ocean, there is no evidence that those persons were involved in the illegal drug trade. And as a matter of fact, let us say that the PNM government and the PNM as a party and the PNM in government has always cooperated with U.S. authorities and our international partners around the world, in Latin America and in the Caribbean, in the fight against narco trafficking and the drug trade, human trafficking. That has always been I served as Minister of National Security for a short time, and within that short time, I had very intensive discussions with our partners in the US and around the world to treat with this particular issue. This is a law enforcement issue, and law enforcement is guided by international law. And if persons are involved in illegal drugs, the use of force is guided by clear policies and our international laws. That the first what you try to do is to arrest, detain, gather the evidence, and prosecute those persons. And the use of lethal force is also governed by clear protocols. That you do so as a last resort when the lives of law enforcement might be placed in jeopardy. So far, with all of the killings, there's no evidence that those persons were involved in drugs. Not 1 gram of cocaine was seized, and all we hear is that those persons were allegedly involved in drug trafficking. The United Nations, last week Friday, the United Nations and Human Rights Chief, the chief has condemned the US military strikes on vessels allegedly carrying drugs in the Caribbean Pacific, and it says that the attacks violate international law and amount to extrajudicial killings. These are very, very serious issues.
You know, I recall when Duterte was in charge of Philippines, he's now before the ICC.
That's correct.
For extrajudicial killings also. He was very hardline towards drug use and their particular scourge in the Philippines and the issues they would have had. I wonder where this will end up. I mean, obviously it's the US, and I've framed all of this to ask the question, do we ultimately have a choice? Because the US, as we know, they operate via different rules. They are indeed the superpower of not only this region, but clearly the world. President Trump in his second term is coming in very sharp, no holds barred, no guardrails. Do we ultimately, as a small developing state, Trinidad and Tobago, with our proximity to Venezuela, could we have really said no from the onset? Because clearly if there's going to be any kind of military intervention, we obviously would be a staging ground. It's inevitable. Do we, as Trinbagonians, as the government, did our Prime Minister have any particular choice in this matter from the onset? Your honest opinion on that?
Of course, the Prime Minister has a choice. The Prime Minister has to demonstrate leadership. As a matter of fact, Trinidad and Tobago is a sovereign, independent, democratic country. And our policies are guided by the UN Charter. We also are a member of the Latin American Caribbean States of Nations, where our current Prime Minister, when she served as Prime Minister between 2010 and 2015 and 2014, went to Havana and signed the proclamation that declared the entire Caribbean as a zone of peace. And Trinidad and Tobago has been a leader, a voice in the region, calling for us to operate as one voice with over 7 million people, where we can assert our affairs, where we can protect our independence as a region, especially when it comes to dealing with big global players like America, Russia, and China. And we have always operated our foreign policy based on these established principles. And as a result of that, this entire region has been declared and has been protected as a zone of peace, operating with the United Nations Charter on non-intervention in the affairs of sovereign nations, to declare this Caribbean as a zone of peace. And therefore, in speaking to large powers, we have hold true and hold faith to these fundamental principles. And because of that, there have been stability throughout this region for over 50 years. This current Prime Minister, for reasons best known to her, has moved away from these fundamental principles, and by so doing has jeopardized not only the lives of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, but the entire region. And it is going to take decades to repair. Imagine, Jason, we are now operating with the prospect of imminent war in this region. And you are hearing leading politicians and ministers in Venezuela threatening that if the U.S. should invade Venezuela, they are going to attack us in Trinidad and Tobago because we have allowed our space to be utilized by a foreign power to attack the Venezuelan people.
We are clearly isolated in that regard. What do you think could happen in the short, medium, and long term as it pertains to our stance within the region? Trinidad and Tobago, we have been leaders. We are considered ourselves and Jamaica, larger islands. You know, we kind of set the tone and set the momentum for our brothers and sisters. What's your take through your political lens on this stance and where we are right now in the region, and how, well, if at all, it could pose any major damage for us in the short, medium, and long term?
The trust and the confidence that Trinidad and Tobago always enjoyed with its partners in the region and in Latin America and around the world, that has been damaged with irreversible consequences.
Irreversible, you say?
Yes. We will not be trusted as a people because our partners looking on as what is taking place in Port of Spain, they don't care whether or not it is the PNM or the UNC form the government. They are seeing Port of Spain taking certain policy decisions that are at variance with what it held on to for the last 50 or 60 years since our independence. The UN Charter, the declaration and the proclamation of this zone of peace. These are things that took years in the making to weave together so that we can operate as a bloc, as an independent nation with a voice in the entire region. It takes years to piece that together. And you are seeing that all of these hard work that took place over the years since our independence is being reversed with serious consequences. And I can say that the next government will have a lot of work to do to repair the damage that has been done under Prime Minister Kamla Persad-Bissessar. We will not be trusted as an ally, as a people, as a friend. We will be looked at with grave suspicion, not only by the Venezuelans, but by our colleagues in CARICOM and around the world, because of the manner in which we are dealing with our foreign policy. And I dare say, it may take decades for the world and the region to trust us in Trinidad and Tobago again. It is a very serious matter, and it is one that citizens should look at seriously. This is not a time for us to take positions because we support the PNM or we support the UNC or we support any other political organization. This is Trinidad and Tobago. And if we love this country, we have to demand of this particular government that you hold fast to our traditions, you respect the UN Charter, you respect our position in CARICOM, and that you ensure that our voices are in alignment with our partners in the region. Because when this time is past, and there is no longer a military confrontation in this part of the region, Venezuela will still be our neighbor. Guyana, Barbados, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, they will still be our neighbors. And we have our work cut out for us to clean up the mess that has been created by Kamla Persad-Bissessar and her incompetent government.
As we look to wrap things up, MP Gonzales, just to speak probably directly to your constituents and by extension the nation as to this moment of uncertainty, is there any silver lining at all in this very dark cloud? Again, we're not too sure what next week will bring. It's really uncharted waters, as I mentioned at the start of the conversation. But are there any words at this point in time to alleviate some of the panic and fear? And they always say in time to come there will be wars and rumors of wars. Yeah. Well, we're in the latter right now, rumors of war. Any closing remarks in that regard? Ease the nation.
Yeah, I want to inform the country, and thank you for that question. Because, as you walk around, Jason, and people ask you, what can we do? Can we call for a referendum to force the government? What does the law provide us so that we, the people, can take charge of our circumstances because of the fears that are currently gripping the nation at this point in time. This is an opportunity for us to really rediscover our independence and what independence means for us. That even though we operate under certain constitutional principles where we go to the polls and we elect our leaders, governance is a day-to-day responsibility not only for the government, but it's a day-to-day responsibility for every single citizen. And therefore, this period of time calls for all sectors in our national community, the churches, all religious organizations, all NGOs, all community-based organizations, all citizens of goodwill, to come together and demand that our government operate within the confines of our Constitution and hold fast to our fundamental principles of the UN Charter and the declaration of the entire region of a zone of peace, and to encourage our government to act in a responsible way where you can speak to the authorities in Venezuela and speak to our partners in the US and resolve all of these issues and conflicts with a view to an outcome of peace and stability in Trinidad and Tobago. But if we sit back and allow the government to run roughshod over our international affairs and our diplomatic affairs, then we will be in serious problem. This is an opportunity for us to come together as a country, regardless of whichever political party you support. Because if a missile lands in Port of Spain or anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago, all of us will be placed in jeopardy. And this is a time where we put aside, and we ought to put aside the politics, and bring this country together and put pressure on the government so that they do not continue to mislead us, that they speak to us clearly, and they take positions that are in the best interest of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and we reverse and we pull ourselves from this brink that we have found ourselves because of the manner in which they have operated and the manner in which they have mismanaged our diplomatic affairs.
Member of Parliament Gonzales.
Thank you very much. God bless you. Appreciate it, man.
Indeed, and we will continue with this very important conversation during the course of the week. Again, Trinidad and Tobago, we are here. We'll try to make sense of all what's taking place, and by all means, we want you to lend your voice to the discussion after the news update at 7. Catch you on the other side with our open forum. See you soon.
I party until it rain, I dressing up in my red, white and black. I don't care what nobody say. Every carnival I done day. Plus I know all artists and only mass bands. Them say I'm mad and I'm mad. I'm telling you where I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. As a Trini, Popo Trini.